Our marriage was ruined when I discovered my husband was in the closet. This is my tale. My name is Casey, and I am 31 years old. I had absolutely no notion. I didn't even suspect anything was wrong. I had been dating my husband, Tim, for 8 years, and we had been married for 6 of those years. Our 2 children are a 2-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. Although it wasn't ideal, our life was typical. As a married couple negotiating the highs and lows of life, jobs, and motherhood, I assumed we were no different. I stayed at home with the kids while my husband put in long hours at a law company. It wasn't always simple. Tim always seemed okay with it, even though I'm not the best with money and I do have a tendency to spend impulsively. As if I were some sort of endearing jerk, he would simply laugh and shake his head. However, there were some indications. Tim spent a lot of time at the pub with his male buddies, and I always noticed, but I never gave it much thought. He put in a lot of work, so I thought he should have some time to relax with the boys after a demanding week. In the past, we had joked about how fortunate I was to be at home with the kids while he was out having leisure time. To me, though, it was always just innocuous man things. That was my initial thought. Anyway, things didn't start to seem strange. Until a few months ago. At first it wasn't clear. It began with him being a bit more aloof. When I would question him about why he was coming home later than normal, he would give me a nebulous explanation, like just wrapping things up at the bar, or got caught up talking with a few guys, and I would overlook it. Considering how diligent he was, I didn't want to come out as nagging. The absence of affection, the brief remarks made during fights, and the fact that his eyes did not contact mine when we spoke were the minor details that began to pile up. The worst part, though, was when I borrowed his phone one evening. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help but be curious because it was simply there on the kitchen counter. One of his buddies had left him a note, but it wasn't your typical exchange. It was flirtatious, something else totally. I had never heard him mention a man named Greg before, but it was a text exchange between them. My stomach fell as I noticed the messages after clicking on the thread. It was more than casual conversation, it was intimate. "Can't wait to see you tonight," Greg wrote to him, although they were only making jokes about meeting at the pub. "I miss you. Love you." I looked at that for what seemed like an eternity, trying to figure out what it meant. Was it a joke? Was he playing a joke? Perhaps that was simply some man chat and nothing more. However, I couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling. And I lost all self-control one night when Tim arrived home later than normal and stank of drink. "What's going on with you and Greg?" I had to inquire. I asked, attempting to speak steadily. He stood motionless in the doorway for a moment before he burst out laughing. "What are you discussing? Nothing is happening." For a moment, I didn't believe him. I pushed harder. "I saw the messages you sent him in which you said, 'I love you.' Why is that happening?" For a brief moment, he appeared uneasy. Then the defenses came into play. I couldn't bring myself to say, "It's just a joke, Casey. Come on, stop being so dramatic." Hours passed while we argued. He became defensive when I sobbed. Both of us spoke unintentional things. He retorted, "It's not what you think, Casey. You just don't trust me anymore." I was afraid, but I didn't want to confess it. I had added, "I guess you'd rather be with your guy friends than with me, huh? You can't even give me a straight answer about who you're texting." I was afraid I might have been blind all along. I may not have known my husband as well as I believed. However, I wasn't going to be the first to give up. I'd always been the type to do things without giving them much thought, and tonight was no exception. I spent the next few days thinking about it, while Tim spent the following few evenings at the pub. When he wasn't there, I would check his phone. Even though I knew it was wrong, I was powerless to stop myself. It grew worse the more I looked. The texts continued, each one more loving than the one before it. They constantly texted each other, "Love you," not just in a light-hearted way, like friends do, but in a way that shows someone they care about, possibly even more than just a buddy. Even though I was irritated, I didn't want to confront him about it once more. I wasn't prepared for him to tell me I was exaggerating and deny everything. I was too afraid of what might be the truth. However, when Greg shared a photo of him and Tim at the bar on social media, something inside of me exploded. Sitting close to one another, they appeared to be more than simply buddies because of the way their heads were pressed together. Even though I had no idea what I was looking at, I realized that this was no longer just a harmless man thing. Even though I had to know the truth, I secretly feared what it would mean for us. After seeing that picture, I couldn't stop thinking about it for the following few days. I was saddened, even devastated, instead of just angry. However, I was still unwilling to confront the truth of what was taking place. Really, how could I? Tim was my spouse and my children's father. Together, we led a life. This isn't possible, is it? However, it was. I couldn't continue to act as though I was blind to what was in front of me. I needed a conversation partner who would be honest with me. So I called Allison, my best friend. From baby showers to breakups, she and I had experienced it all together. No one knew me as well as she did. She was the one who could assist me in deciding what to do. After the second ring, she picked up. "Casey, hey, what's going on? You sound off." I inhaled deeply as I sat on the living room couch while the children played softly in the distance. "It's Tim. I think he's seeing someone else, or at least he's got some. There was something going on with one of his guy friends." I didn't know what to do. There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her brain working, processing everything I was saying. Then she spoke, her voice low but sharp. "Are you sure? As in, absolutely certain?" I tightened my throat and added, "I found messages," adding that I had seen a photo of them together. She was silent for a while, presumably trying to think of anything to say. Before saying, "Okay, well, you need to get yourself out of that situation. It doesn't look like just friends. It's more than that, ally. You must take part of him and get a divorce. It's clear that he doesn't value your marriage or you. Why would you stay for this, Casey?" The notion of separating our family and losing Tim made me feel physically ill, and her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Divorce. I hadn't even thought about that. I wasn't sure what I'd expected her to say, but it wasn't that. I blurted out, "I still love him, ally," before I could stop myself. "I don't want to discard everything, especially not in front of the children. I'm not sure I could pull it off." Her voice was calm but still had a hint of sharpness when she finally responded after a prolonged period of silence. "I understand, Casey. You deserve better than this. Even though you love him, he is not treating you with the respect that you deserve. Keep him from stepping all over you. Don't allow him to make you look foolish. You don't have to put up with this any longer. You have other options." I wasn't sure how to react to that. She was partially correct. I had other choices. I didn't have to continue living in a marriage in which my husband was obviously deceiving me, but I couldn't just go, could I? Was it really that easy? I couldn't stop thinking about what Allison had said, how she was telling me to just let him go and move on, but I couldn't. I couldn't just give up on everything we'd built, so I had to try speaking to Tim one last time. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps there was a straightforward explanation. I ended the call with Allison feeling more lost than ever. I sat him down the following night after the kids had gone to bed because I needed an explanation because he had been behaving more aloof than normal. And I didn't want to be one of those women who kept acting like nothing was wrong. I replied in a trembling but forceful voice, "Tim," and he looked up at me from his phone, his face expressionless. "We need to talk. How about?" I noticed the photo and the messages. I blurted out, "What's up with you and Greg?" He just stared at me for a time without saying anything, and I could feel the tension in the air between us and my pulse thumping in my chest. At last, he sighed and sat up straighter. "I told you it was nothing, Casey. Just some innocuous friend-to-friend teasing. You're exaggerating the situation. Don't lie to me, Tim." I was tired of excuses and didn't want to hear that again. "I witnessed it. He's being flirted with by you. It doesn't sound like merely love." His eyes became stony. My irritation was getting the better of me. I told you it's not like that. Why can't you just trust me for once? You're asking me to trust you after everything I've seen. After the messages. After the photo. You think I'm just supposed to act like everything's fine. He raised his arms and tightened his jaw. I realized that he wasn't even attempting to accept responsibility for his behavior when I said, "Maybe you should start trusting me more, Casey. I'm not the one with the problem here." He was evading me, as if I were the one who had asked him the question. "I'm not the problem, Tim," I continued, raising my voice. "You are. You're the one acting like everything's a joke, like I'm just some idiot who doesn't notice what's really going on. But I'm not stupid." "I never said you were stupid," he answered, "but maybe you should focus more on our marriage and less on what I'm doing with my friends." I wanted to shout. I didn't think this talk would go this way. This is not how it was intended to be. Instead of making matters worse, I was meant to be receiving answers. When I said, "I just want the truth, Tim," my voice broke. He said little more than, "I want to know if this is even worth saving." He simply got up, picked up his jacket, and walked out of the house. That was the end of it. I pondered whether this was the end, as I sat there in the quiet, gazing at the empty spot where he had been. The days that followed were a haze. That evening, and the following day, Tim failed to return home. He didn't answer the phone when I tried to reach him. I initially believed that he was simply cooling off, but as the hours turned into days, I began to feel that same feeling of dread grabbing hold of me. Did this actually occur? Was this really how he was going to cut me off? I tried to keep things normal and hide my broken state from the children throughout those days. I felt alienated in my own home, but they were still too young to see the tension between Tim and me. Our family's home, which had always felt like home, had begun to feel chilly and deserted. Then the text arrived. It came from an unidentified phone number. "Hey Casey, I don't know how to say this, but Tim and we've been seeing each other, and he told me he loves me. I know it's not easy, but I think you deserve to know the truth." The note was signed simply, Greg. It seemed as though someone had punched me in the gut. I had to sit down since my vision became blurry. Suspecting something was wrong was one thing, but there was no denying this. Everything I had feared and lamented was there, in black and white. I had no idea what to do. I read the message several times over in an attempt to make sense of it, but my mind was in complete chaos. It took me a while to even process it. My life felt as though I were living someone else's. What caused my blindness? How could I have failed to anticipate this? Allison called in no time at all. Perhaps Tim had told her about it, or she must have heard it through the grapevine. She asked, "Did you get the text too?" And I could tell she was tense. At first, I didn't even answer, since I wasn't sure what to say. "Casey," she insisted, "are you okay?" "I'm not okay," I muttered, hardly able to speak. I heard Allison swear under her breath, "It's real, it's happening. Hugh's been with Greg. He told him he loves him," even though she couldn't see me. I shook my head and said, "I knew it. I knew something was up. You've got to get out of there, Casey. There's no point in holding on to someone who's obviously checked out." "I can't, Allison. I love him. I can't just throw everything away. Kids, my life." She yelled, "All that's fine. But what about you? What about your happiness? You deserve so much more than this. He's made his choice. He's made it clear that you don't matter. I mean, what more do you need? He's gone. Casey, don't waste your time." I remained mute as her words weighed heavily on me. I wanted to yell at her that it wasn't that easy, that she didn't get it, and that she wasn't in my position. In actuality, though I knew she was correct, a part of me understood that I needed to go, that I needed to defend my own sanity and tranquility. A part of me, though, just wanted to snuggle up and act like nothing was going on. I wanted things to return to their previous state. I wanted Tim to come home, say he was sorry, and assure me that everything would be all right. I knew that wasn't possible though. My children's father, the guy I had loved, was no longer with me. He was already with someone else, somewhere else. Tim arrived home late that evening, after the children had gone to sleep. I waited for him to approach me after hearing him moving about below, but he didn't. Rather, he stood staring at me from the living room doorway. It was oppressive to be silent with each other. I inhaled deeply and said, "We need to talk." He nodded slowly, as if he had anticipated this, yet there was a coldness in his gaze. He wasn't even the man I believed I knew. He wasn't the man I had married. I said, "I got the text," in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. "I know what's been going on. I know about you and Greg." At first, he remained silent and simply stood with his arms crossed, staring at me with the same expressionless face. I had anticipated that he would refute it, say anything that would lead me to doubt it. However, he didn't. When he eventually responded, "I'm sorry," his tone was devoid of sincerity. The statement struck me like a blow to the face. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, but I can't keep pretending. "Casey, it's not fair to either of us." My thoughts were racing as I gazed at him. "You're just going to walk away just like that?" He gave a shrug. "I don't want to keep hurting you. I don't want to lie to you anymore." My rage flared up once more. "You've been lying to me for months, Tim. You've been lying to me every time you walked out that door. You've been lying to me every time you kissed me goodnight and promised everything was fine." He let out a sigh. "I can't change the fact that things turned out this way, even though I didn't want it to. Both of us have evolved. I'm not the man you believed me to be, and you're not the woman I married, Casey. The remarks went deeper than I was prepared to acknowledge. In actuality, he was correct. We were different. Perhaps, just possibly, this was the wake-up call I needed to realize that I had changed. However, that didn't lessen the pain. With tears in my eyes, I muttered, "Is this it?" He gave me a long look, and for a few seconds I thought I saw regret in his eyes. "Is this how it ends?" he asked. Then it vanished, to be replaced by the same icy apathy. When we both signed the paperwork, I couldn't believe it. "I'm sorry, Casey, but I think we're done." When I told Tim that I wanted a divorce, he didn't even protest. I had the uncanny feeling that I was witnessing the events of another person's life. A part of me felt relieved, the one I didn't want to admit. However, the agony, that intense anguish in my chest, persisted. The children were young enough to recover from their confusion. I made an effort to act as though nothing had changed, but it had. And eventually, I came to terms with the fact that this was our last chance. I expected to feel lost or empty after the divorce, but instead I started to feel like a burden had been lifted. I no longer had to deal with the ongoing worry, the fear of never being good enough, or the fatigue of attempting to maintain a marriage that had been sliding away from me for so long. Unbeknownst to me at the time, Tim's departure marked the start of something else that I would later realize was best. However, what followed astounded me the most. When Tim first appeared in the neighborhood, he had a totally different appearance. I didn't recognize him at first. He was wearing makeup, light foundation, and some eyeliner. He was wearing a dress, not just any dress, but one that was flamboyant, colorful, and even theatrical. I had never seen his hair styled like that before. It seemed as though he had completely changed into someone else and shed the person I believed I knew. It seemed as though he was at last able to be the person he had long concealed. His entire manner had changed, not just the way he looked. He exuded more vitality, self-assurance, and I couldn't dispute that he was finally happy, even though it was startling to see him in this state. It seemed like a burden had been removed from both of us since it was, in a sense, the person I had never known he could be. One afternoon, I saw him strolling down the street with his arms wrapped around a man and laughing. Without a worry in the world, they were holding hands. Seeing him so at ease in his own skin hurt, but I came to the realization that the man I had been clinging to, the man I had attempted to save, was no longer the man I wanted. He was unfamiliar to me, and perhaps that was the intention. We weren't meant to be together, and he was now discovering who he truly was. I was better off without him, and I had never understood he was no longer a part of my life and was unable to show me the kind of love I deserved. It's also possible that he did better without me. I came to the realization that this divorce might have been the greatest thing for us both, as I watched him grow into his own, fearlessly and without regret. It allowed him to become the person he had always been but was unable to show me. And it spared me from a future in which I would be forced to be married to a man who wasn't even being honest with himself. After seeing him at last content and free, I no longer had any regrets. I couldn't immediately see it, but it felt like everything happened for a reason, even if it took our divorce for him to discover it. The most difficult choices might occasionally result in the best results.